Detective Ramon Torres and his partner, Officer Kyle Bennett, were having what they thought would be another boring Tuesday afternoon shift in downtown Washington, D.C. They had been patrolling the federal district for hours without much action, just the usual traffic and office workers rushing between buildings. Kyle was complaining about his lunch, some overpriced sandwich that didn't live up to the hype, when Ramon spotted a sleek black sedan rolling through an intersection. "Did you see that?" Ramon asked, already flipping on the lights. "And see what?" Kyle replied, still thinking about his disappointing meal. "That car just ran the stop sign. Black sedan about 50 yards ahead." The vehicle pulled over smoothly, no hesitation, no drama. As they approached, Ramon noticed the car was immaculate, probably worth more than his annual salary. The driver's window rolled down before he even reached it, which he always took as a good sign. Most people who were about to give him trouble usually made him wait. Behind the wheel sat a black woman who looked to be in her late 40s. She was dressed like she had just come from an important meeting, her outfit professional and expensive looking. Her hands were already visible on the steering wheel, her license and registration ready in her other hand. Everything about her demeanor was calm, practiced, like someone who knew exactly how these encounters were supposed to go. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Ramon said, taking the documents. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" The woman, Dr. Vanessa Morrison, though he didn't know her name yet, looked at him directly. Her voice was measured and clear. "Officer, I believe there may be a misunderstanding. I came to a complete stop at that intersection." Ramon felt his jaw tighten slightly. He hated when people argued right off the bat. "Ma'am, I clearly saw your vehicle roll through the stop sign without coming to a full stop. With respect, officer, I did stop. Completely. I'm very careful about traffic laws, especially in this area." Kyle had walked up to the passenger side, mostly out of protocol. He caught Ramon's eye and smirked. That look they shared when they both thought someone was trying to talk their way out of a ticket. Ramon had seen it 1,000 times before. Everyone thought they were the exception, that their excuse would be the one that worked. "I'm going to need you to wait here while I run your information," Ramon said. His tone a bit cooler now. Dr. Morrison nodded politely. "Of course. May I have your badge number, please? For my records." That request made Ramon pause. It wasn't unusual exactly, but it always felt like a challenge, like someone was already planning to complain. Kyle actually chuckled under his breath. "Another one who thinks they're special?" he muttered, just loud enough that Dr. Morrison could probably hear through the open window. Ramon shot his partner a look that said, "Not now." But he couldn't completely hide his own irritation. He recited his badge number, maybe a bit faster than necessary, and walked back to the patrol car. As he ran her license, he noticed her record was completely clean. Not even a parking ticket. The car was registered to her, address in a very nice part of town. Everything checked out perfectly, which somehow made him more convinced she was just another entitled driver who thought rules didn't apply to them. "Absolutely nothing," he told Kyle. "Clean as a whistle." "They're always the worst," Kyle replied. "The ones with money and no record think they can just sweet-talk their way out of everything." Ramon nodded, already filling out the citation. The thing was, he genuinely believed he had seen her roll through that stop. Maybe she had slowed down really well, but he was pretty sure she hadn't come to a complete stop. His judgment had always been good. 5 years on the force, commendations for his attention to detail. He wasn't about to second-guess himself because someone dressed nice and had a clean record. When he walked back to her car, Dr. Morrison was typing something on her phone. She looked up as he approached, her expression still calm but with something else behind it now. Not anger exactly, but a kind of careful observation. Like she was documenting everything in her mind. "Ma'am, I'm citing you for failure to stop at a posted stop sign," Ramon said, handing her the ticket along with her documents. "You have the option to pay the fine or contest it in court. All the information is on the citation." Dr. Morrison took the papers and read through them slowly, thoroughly. "Officer Torres," she said, reading his name from the ticket. "I will be contesting this citation. As I stated, I did come to a complete stop." "That's your right, ma'am," Ramon replied, keeping his voice professional. "Court date is listed there." "I see that. Thank you." She placed the citation in her passenger seat, organizing it with the careful precision of someone who kept immaculate records. Then she looked at him again. Just so I'm clear, you're stating that I failed to stop completely at the intersection of Constitution Avenue and 8th Street, correct? That's correct. At approximately 2:15 p.m. today? Yes, ma'am. She nodded, making another note on her phone. Thank you, officer. I'll see you in court. There was something about the way she said it that wasn't threatening exactly, but it made Ramon feel like maybe this wouldn't be the routine ticket he thought it was. Still, he had done everything by the book. His observation, his call, his citation. If she wanted to waste time fighting it in court, that was her choice. As Dr. Morrison pulled away, Ramon and Kyle walked back to their car. Kyle was shaking his head, grinning. Did you see how she was taking notes? Like she's building some kind of case. Over a stop sign. Ramon laughed, though something nagged at him. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Camera doesn't lie. He tapped the dashcam on their patrol car, which had captured the whole intersection. What Ramon didn't know was that Dr. Morrison's car also had cameras. Multiple cameras. Very good cameras that recorded everything from multiple angles, including a clear view of her wheels coming to a complete stop. Her brake lights illuminating for a full 3 seconds before she proceeded through the intersection. As she drove away, checking them in her rearview mirror, she saw both officers standing by their car, laughing about something. She had heard Kyle's comment. She had caught the smirks, the eye rolls, the subtle shift in tone that she had experienced too many times before in her life, the assumption that she was just another person trying to get away with something, rather than someone telling the truth. Dr. Morrison had worked too hard and come too far to let disrespect slide, regardless of where it came from. She had a decision to make. She could pay the fine, let it go, move on with her incredibly busy and important life, or she could take a stand, not just for herself, but for every person who didn't have her resources to fight back when they were treated unfairly. By the time she reached her office at Homeland Security headquarters, her mind was made up. She marked the court date on her calendar and asked her assistant to clear that afternoon. This ticket was going to court, and Officers Torres and Bennett had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks passed quickly, and the morning of the court date arrived with typical Washington, D.C. weather. Overcast and humid. Dr. Vanessa Morrison stood in front of her closet, considering her options carefully. She had suits that commanded attention, designer pieces that announced status and authority the moment she walked into a room. But today wasn't about making an entrance. Today was about proving a point, and she wanted to do it without any advantages that might distract from the facts. She chose a simple navy blue suit, professional but understated, the kind you could find at any department store. No flashy jewelry, just her watch and simple earrings. She wanted to blend in with everyone else who would be contesting tickets that afternoon. Let the evidence speak, not her wardrobe or her credentials. The municipal courthouse was exactly what she expected. Crowded, slightly worn, with that particular smell of old buildings and nervous people. Security lines moved slowly as people fumbled with their phones and keys. Dr. Morrison waited patiently, watching the mix of citizens around her. Some looked angry, others resigned. A few clearly had no idea what they were doing. She had prepared meticulously, bringing her dashcam footage on a USB drive, printed stills showing her complete stop, and a detailed timeline of the incident. Inside the courtroom, wooden benches were already filling up. Cases were scheduled every 15 minutes, an assembly line of justice that rarely slowed down for anyone. Dr. Morrison found a seat in the middle section and settled in to wait. She pulled out a book, keeping herself occupied while case after case was called before hers. Most people paid their fines. A few argued briefly and lost. The judge, a tired-looking woman named Judge Patricia Hendricks, seemed efficient but fair, at least from what Dr. Morrison could observe. Then the door at the back opened, and Officers Ramon Torres and Kyle Bennett walked in, both in full uniform. They were chatting casually, completely relaxed, clearly having done this dozens of times before. Ramon carried a thin folder, probably with his notes from the stop. Kyle didn't seem to be carrying anything at all, just there to provide backup testimony if needed. They spotted the prosecutor's table and headed over, greeting the assistant district attorney with friendly familiarity. Dr. Morrison watched them over the top of her book. Neither officer glanced in her direction. Why would they? Just another citizen contesting. Another ticket, one of many they had written. She doubted they even remembered her specifically. The prosecutor was a young woman who looked fresh out of law school, maybe 26 or 27 years old. Jennifer Walsh, according to the nameplate on the table. She was juggling multiple files, clearly handling a heavy caseload, checking her phone repeatedly and shuffling through papers with the frantic energy of someone who was behind. Schedule before the day even started, Morrison versus District of Columbia. The bailiff called out. Dr. Morrison stood, smoothing her suit jacket, and walked to the defendant's table. She set her folder down neatly organized and ready. As she turned slightly, she finally made eye contact with Officer Torres. She saw the moment of recognition cross his face, followed immediately by a flash of confidence. He remembered her now, the woman who had argued at the stop, who had asked for his badge number, who had said she would see him in court. Well, here she was, and he clearly felt ready. Your Honor, Jennifer Walsh began, standing quickly. The district is prepared to proceed. This is a straightforward failure to stop violation. Officer Torres witnessed the defendant run a stop sign at Constitution and 8th on the afternoon of September 10th. Judge Hendricks looked down at her notes. Ms. Morrison, you're contesting this citation? Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Morrison's voice was clear and calm. I came to a complete stop at that intersection. The citation is incorrect. The judge nodded, having heard similar claims probably 100 times. Officer Torres, please approach the stand. Ramon walked up confidently, was sworn in, and took his seat. He had done this before, knew the routine, knew how these cases usually went. Jennifer Walsh ran through the basic questions efficiently. Officer Torres, please describe what you observed on September 10th at approximately 2:15 p.m. Ramon sat up straight, professional. My partner and I were patrolling the Federal District when I observed a black sedan approaching the intersection of Constitution and 8th Street. I watched as the vehicle approached the stop sign and failed to come to a complete stop before proceeding through the intersection. The driver slowed down but did not stop. I activated my lights and initiated a traffic stop. And did you clearly observe the violation? Jennifer asked. Yes, ma'am. Very clearly. The vehicle rolled through without stopping. From the benches where the other officers sat waiting for their own cases, Dr. Morrison heard a low chuckle. Someone whispered something she couldn't quite make out. But the tone was clear. Enough. Dismissive, amused, like this was all just a formality before the inevitable guilty verdict and fine. Judge Hendricks turned to Dr. Morrison. Do you wish to cross-examine the witness? Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Morrison stood, picking up her folder. She approached the stand calmly, not aggressive but clearly prepared. Officer Torres, in your citation you wrote that the violation occurred at 2:15 p.m., correct? Ramon nodded. That's correct. And you stated I was traveling on Constitution Avenue approaching 8th Street from the east? Yes. Your patrol car was positioned where exactly? Ramon hesitated for just a second. We were heading westbound on Constitution behind your vehicle. So you were behind me observing my brake lights and vehicle behavior? Yes. Dr. Morrison pulled out a photograph from her folder. Your Honor, may I approach? At the judge's nod, she handed copies to both the prosecutor and the judge. This is a still image from my vehicle's dashcam, time-stamped at 2:14 and 47 seconds p.m. As you can see, my vehicle is completely stopped at the intersection, brake lights illuminated. The courtroom got quieter. Jennifer Walsh leaned forward, studying the image with suddenly intense focus. Ramon's confident expression flickered slightly. Dr. Morrison continued, her voice still measured and professional. Officer Torres, from your position behind my vehicle, is it possible you misjudged whether I had come to a complete stop? I know what I saw, Ramon said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. I'm sure you believe that, Dr. Morrison replied, not unkindly. But the physical evidence shows otherwise. She heard another sound from the officer section, but this time it wasn't laughter. Kyle Bennett had leaned over to whisper something to the officer next to him, and that officer had made a dismissive noise. She thinks she's a lawyer now, someone said, not quite quietly enough. Judge Hendricks's gavel came down sharply. Order! I will have order in this courtroom. She fixed the officer's section with a stern look before turning back to the proceedings. But the damage was done. The disrespect was obvious, hanging in the air. Dr. Morrison felt that familiar mixture of frustration and determination. She had experienced this her whole career. People underestimating her, dismissing her, assuming she didn't belong in whatever room she was in. but she had learned long ago that the best response wasn't anger. It was excellence. "Your Honor," Dr. Morrison said, "I have additional evidence. I'd like to submit the complete video footage from my dashcam, which shows the entire approach to the intersection, my complete stop, and my proceeding through after confirming it was safe." Jennifer Walsh stood up quickly. "Your Honor, may I have a moment to review this evidence before it's submitted?" The judge looked annoyed at the delay but nodded. "Make it quick, counselor." Jennifer took the USB drive from Dr. Morrison and plugged it into her laptop. Her supervisor, who had been sitting at the back reviewing files, noticed the unusual pause in proceedings and walked forward to see what was happening. He was an older man, maybe late 50s, who had been with the prosecutor's office for decades. He leaned over Jennifer's shoulder to watch the screen. Dr. Morrison observed as both of their expressions changed while watching the footage. The video showed everything clearly. Her approach to the intersection, gradual slowing, complete stop with wheels motionless for a full 3 seconds, checking for traffic, then proceeding. It was textbook perfect. The supervisor's face went pale. He pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly, his fingers moving with urgent purpose. Then his eyes widened as he read something on his screen. He looked up sharply, staring at Dr. Morrison with sudden recognition, then leaned down to whisper urgently in Jennifer's ear. Jennifer's eyes went wide. She looked at her supervisor, then at Dr. Morrison, then back at her screen. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh no," Dr. Morrison heard her whisper. The supervisor was already moving toward the bench. "Your Honor, the prosecution requests an immediate sidebar." Judge Hendricks looked irritated. "Counselor, we're in the middle of testimony. Your Honor, please." "This is urgent." Something about his tone made the judge pause. She had known the supervisor for years, and he wasn't the type to interrupt proceedings without good reason. "Very well, approach." The whispered conversation at the bench was intense. Dr. Morrison could see the prosecutor's supervisor showing the judge something on his phone. The judge's expression transformed from annoyed to shocked, to deeply concerned in the space of about 30 seconds. She looked over at Dr. Morrison with completely new eyes, then back at the phone, then at Officers Torres and Bennett, who were starting to look nervous. When the sidebar ended, Judge Hendricks's entire demeanor had changed. She straightened in her chair, her voice taking on a much more formal tone. "Ms. Morrison, before we proceed further, I need to ask you something for the record." The judge paused, choosing her words carefully. "Could you please state your full name and your current occupation?" The courtroom went completely silent. Even the officers who had been whispering stopped. Everyone sensed that something significant was about to happen. Dr. Morrison stood tall. Dr. Vanessa Morrison, Deputy Director of Operations, United States Department of Homeland Security. The reaction was immediate and electric. Officers Torres and Bennett looked like they had been struck by lightning. Kyle actually stood up from his seat, his face draining of all color. Ramon gripped the witness stand, his knuckles turning white. The officers who had been snickering moments before sat frozen, their mouths literally hanging open. The same cops who had jeered and whispered insults, who had treated this like just another routine ticket from someone trying to talk their way out of trouble, suddenly realized they had been mocking one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the entire country. And court was just getting started. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the old wooden floor. Judge Hendricks sat back in her chair, processing what she had just heard. The prosecutor's supervisor had his head in his hands. Jennifer Walsh looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. And Officers Torres and Bennett, well, they looked like they had just realized they had walked into a trap of their own making. Dr. Morrison remained standing at the defendant's table, her posture relaxed but dignified. She hadn't said it to intimidate anyone or to pull rank. She had simply answered the judge's direct question. But the weight of those words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Judge Hendricks cleared her throat, visibly collecting herself. "Dr. Morrison, I apologize for the disruption. Please continue with your cross-examination if you wish." "Actually, Your Honor, I think the video evidence speaks for itself," Dr. Morrison said calmly. "I'd like to formally submit the dashcam footage into evidence and rest my defense." "So noted." The judge turned to the prosecutor's table. "Ms. Walsh, does the district wish to continue with this case?" Jennifer stood up shakily. She was young, inexperienced, and clearly way out of her depth now. Her supervisor leaned over and whispered something to her. She nodded, looking relieved to have guidance. Your Honor, given the video evidence presented, the district moves to dismiss all charges against Dr. Morrison. We acknowledge that the citation was issued in error. Motion granted. Judge Hendricks brought her gavel down firmly. All charges dismissed. Dr. Morrison, you're free to go, and please accept the court's sincerest apologies for this waste of your valuable time. But Dr. Morrison didn't move to leave. She stood there for a moment, looking at the judge, then at the prosecutor, then finally at Officer Torres, who was still sitting in the witness stand looking like he wanted to evaporate. Your Honor, before I go, may I say something for the record? Dr. Morrison asked. Judge Hendricks nodded slowly. Of course. This isn't about me or my position, Dr. Morrison began, her voice carrying clearly through the now completely silent courtroom. This is about the fact that I had video evidence proving my innocence. Most people don't have that. Most people can't afford dash cams or don't think to install them. Most people would have just paid this fine, even though they knew they were right, because fighting it takes time and money and effort that not everyone has. She turned slightly to look at Ramon directly. He couldn't meet her eyes. Officer Torres testified under oath that he clearly saw me run that stop sign. He was certain, confident, but he was wrong. The question is, how many other times has he been wrong? How many other people has he cited who didn't have video proof? How many people paid fines for violations they didn't commit because an officer was certain about something that never actually happened? Ramon's face had gone from pale to red. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say. The evidence had proven him completely wrong. Judge Hendricks was nodding slowly. Dr. Morrison, your point is well taken and will be noted in the record. Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Morrison began gathering her materials, carefully placing the USB drive back in her folder, organizing her papers with the same precision she had shown throughout the entire proceeding. The prosecutor's supervisor approached quickly. Dr. Morrison, if we could have just a moment of your time, we'd like to discuss this matter further, perhaps in chambers. Dr. Morrison looked at him with an expression that was professional but firm. I don't think that will be necessary. I'll be filing a formal complaint through the appropriate channels. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division will be receiving a full report of this incident, along with all evidence, including the dash cam footage from the original traffic stop. The supervisor's face went even paler. Dr. Morrison, please, if we could just talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, she said, not unkindly but with absolute finality. This needs to be investigated properly, through official channels. I'm sure you understand. Before anyone else could speak, Officers Torres and Bennett approached from the side. They had finally worked up the courage to face her, though both looked like they were walking to their own execution. Kyle was sweating visibly and Ramon's hands were trembling slightly. Dr. Morrison, Ramon started, his voice cracking slightly. We had no idea who you were. If we had known. Dr. Morrison held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Her eyes were steady, not angry but penetrating, like she could see right through to the core of the problem. Stop right there, Officer Torres, she said quietly. Do you hear what you just said? You had no idea who I was. If you had known, that's exactly the problem. Ramon looked confused, not quite understanding. Kyle shifted nervously from foot to foot. Dr. Morrison continued, her voice still calm but carrying an edge now. You should treat every citizen with respect and honesty, regardless of whether you know who they are. Whether they're a federal official or a homeless person or a teenager or a grandmother, it shouldn't matter. The standard of conduct should be the same. We understand that, ma'am, we just... Kyle tried to interject. Do you? Dr. Morrison asked. Because 3 weeks ago at that traffic stop I was calm and respectful. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse at you. I simply told you the truth, that I had stopped at that sign. And you dismissed me. You mocked me behind my back thinking I couldn't hear. You were so certain you were right that you didn't even consider the possibility that you might be mistaken. Ramon's face was burning red now, shame written all over his features. Ma'am, I genuinely thought I saw... I know you did, Dr. Morrison said, and her voice softened just a fraction. And that's what worries me most. You weren't lying. You genuinely believed you were right. But you were wrong. Human perception is fallible, Officer Torres. We all make mistakes, but when those mistakes can result in fines, court dates, points on licenses, Increased insurance rates or worse, we have to be more careful. We have to be willing to admit when we might be wrong. She reached into her folder and pulled out 2 business cards. She handed one to each officer. They took them with shaking hands. "You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs," she said. "The Department of Justice will also be conducting a review. This isn't just about punishing you. This is about making sure this doesn't happen to other people who don't have video evidence to prove their innocence." Kyle looked like he might be sick. "Are we going to lose our jobs?" Dr. Morrison studied him for a moment. "That's not my decision to make. But I will tell you this. I've spent my entire career in law enforcement and national security. I know good officers and bad officers. I don't think you're bad officers. I think you're officers who have developed some bad habits, some unconscious biases, some shortcuts in thinking that have led to situations like this." She picked up her folder, preparing to leave. "What happens next depends on how you respond. Are you going to be defensive, make excuses, blame everyone else? Or are you going to take a hard look at yourselves, at your practices, at the way you interact with the public you're supposed to serve?" Ramon finally found his voice, and it was barely above a whisper. "We're sorry, Dr. Morrison, truly sorry. Don't apologize to me," she replied. "Apologize to all the people you've cited who didn't have dash cams. Apologize to the communities you patrol. Apologize by being better." The courtroom was still completely silent. Everyone had watched this interaction unfold like they were witnessing something historic. Other people waiting for their cases had pulled out their phones, some recording, others just watching in stunned silence. As Dr. Morrison turned to leave, she noticed a young black man sitting in the back row. He was probably in his early 20s, dressed in work clothes, holding a citation in his hand. He was staring at her with an expression of pure amazement, like he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. When their eyes met, he nodded at her, a small gesture of respect and gratitude. She nodded back. She walked down the center aisle of the courtroom, her heels clicking on the old floor, the only sound in the entire room. People moved aside to let her pass, some with expressions of respect, others with barely concealed satisfaction at having witnessed 2 cops get taken down a peg. Just as she reached the door, Judge Hendricks spoke up. "Dr. Morrison?" She turned back. "Yes, Your Honor." "Thank you," the judge said simply, "for not letting this slide, for standing up, for making it about more than just yourself." Dr. Morrison gave a small smile. "It's what the job requires, Your Honor, protecting people, all people, even from systems that are supposed to serve them." She pushed through the courtroom doors and was gone. Behind her, the courtroom erupted into whispered conversations. Officers Torres and Bennett stood frozen, still holding her business cards like they were holding their own death sentences. Jennifer Walsh was already on her phone, probably calling her supervisor's supervisor to explain what had just happened. The other officers who had been laughing and making jokes earlier were now silent, exchanging nervous looks. Within 48 hours, both Torres and Bennett were placed on administrative leave. The Internal Affairs investigation started immediately. Their body camera footage from the traffic stop was subpoenaed and reviewed. Their citation records for the past 3 years were pulled and analyzed. Patterns began to emerge, patterns that nobody had been looking at closely enough before. But all of that was still to come. In that moment, in that courtroom, the only thing that mattered was that someone had finally said what needed to be said, someone with enough power that it couldn't be ignored, but enough integrity that it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, real justice, the kind that makes systems better, not just individuals pay, and that was something worth fighting for. The news spread through the police department like wildfire. By the time officers Torres and Bennett returned to the precinct that afternoon, everyone already knew. The story had taken on a life of its own, growing with each retelling. Some versions were accurate, others wildly exaggerated, but the core facts remained the same. 2 officers had written a bogus ticket to someone who turned out to be one of the highest-ranking federal officials in the country, and it had all blown up spectacularly in court. Ramon sat at his desk staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. His hands were still shaking slightly. The business card Dr. Morrison had given him sat on his desk, her title printed in simple black letters. Deputy Director of Operations, Department of Homeland Security. He had Googled her on his phone during the drive back. Her credentials were intimidating. Multiple degrees, decades of experience, oversight of thousands of employees, Security clearances he could barely imagine, and he had treated her like just another driver trying to talk her way out of a ticket. Kyle was at the desk next to him, equally quiet. Neither of them had spoken much since leaving the courthouse. What was there to say? They had messed up badly, and now they were waiting for the hammer to fall. Their sergeant, a gruff veteran named Bill Cooper, who had been with the department for 25 years, walked over. His expression was unreadable. "My office. Both of you. Now." They followed him like condemned men walking to the gallows. Once inside with the door closed, Sergeant Cooper sat heavily in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. He looked exhausted, and it wasn't even 3 in the afternoon yet. "I just got off the phone with the chief," he said finally. "Internal Affairs is opening a full investigation. You're both on administrative leave effective immediately. Badge and gun on my desk." Ramon felt his stomach drop. He had known it was coming, but hearing it out loud made it real. "Sarge, listen, we didn't know—" "Stop!" Cooper cut him off.
"Just stop."
"I've already heard the story 3 different ways. I don't need your version right now. What I need is for you two to understand how serious this is." "It was an honest mistake," Kyle protested weakly. "I mean, Ramon thought he saw her run the sign." Cooper leaned forward, his eyes hard. "An honest mistake?" Her dash cam showed a complete 3-second stop. "How is that an honest mistake? And that's not even the worst part." "You know what the worst part is?" Neither officer responded. "The worst part," Cooper continued, his voice getting louder, "is that Internal Affairs pulled your citation records. They're finding patterns. You two write a disproportionate number of tickets in minority neighborhoods. A lot of those tickets get dismissed or challenged. Nobody was looking at it closely before, but now they're looking at everything with a microscope." Ramon felt sick. "We patrol those neighborhoods more, that's why the numbers—" "Save it," Cooper interrupted. "Save it for Internal Affairs. Save it for the DOJ investigators. Save it for whoever else comes knocking. Because trust me, more people are coming. When a deputy director of Homeland Security files a complaint, people pay attention." The weight of what they were facing was starting to sink in. This wasn't just going to blow over. This was going to follow them for the rest of their careers, maybe end their careers entirely. Kyle's voice was small. "What do we do, Sarge?" Cooper sighed, and some of the anger left his voice. He had known both these officers for years. They weren't bad guys, not really. But they had gotten sloppy, complacent, maybe developed some biases they didn't even realize they had. "You get a lawyer," he said finally. "You cooperate fully with the investigation. You don't talk to the press, and you start thinking real hard about why this happened and how you're going to make sure it never happens again." They surrendered their badges and weapons, the physical act of placing them on Cooper's desk feeling symbolic and final. As they left his office, they could feel the eyes of every other officer in the precinct on them. Some looks were sympathetic, others judgmental, but all of them carried the same unspoken message. "There but for the grace of God go I." Meanwhile, across town at Homeland Security headquarters, Dr. Morrison was in a meeting with her Deputy Director of Legal Affairs and the department's chief counsel. She had filed her formal complaint within hours of leaving the courthouse, and the wheels of bureaucracy were already turning. "The DOJ is taking this very seriously," the chief counsel said, reviewing documents on his tablet. "They're assigning a team from the Civil Rights Division. They want to interview you, review all your evidence, and conduct their own investigation into the department's practices." Dr. Morrison nodded. "Good. That's what needs to happen." Vanessa, her deputy director, said carefully, "You know this is going to get public attention. The media will love this story. High-ranking official fights back against unfair ticket. It's going to be everywhere." "I know," Dr. Morrison replied calmly, "and that's fine. Maybe it needs to be public. Maybe people need to see that this kind of thing happens and that there are consequences." "The department's police union is already making noise," the chief counsel added. "They're saying you're using your position to bully street officers, that you could have just paid the ticket like anyone else." Dr. Morrison's expression hardened. "I could have paid an unjust fine for a violation I didn't commit? That's their argument? That people should just accept being wrongly accused because fighting back is too much trouble? I'm just telling you what they're saying," he replied. "You need to be prepared for pushback." "I am prepared," she said firmly. "I've been dealing with pushback my entire career. This isn't about me versus 2 officers. This is about systemic problems that need to be addressed." Over the next week, the investigation expanded rapidly. Internal affairs investigators reviewed hundreds of traffic stops conducted by Torres and Bennett. They found troubling patterns. A significantly higher percentage of their stops involved minorities. Many of their citations were for minor violations that were hard to definitively prove. When people contested the tickets, the officer's testimony often included phrases like, "I clearly observed," and "without question," even when video evidence was ambiguous or contradictory. More concerning, they found several complaints that had been filed against both officers over the years. None had been serious enough to warrant discipline on their own, but taken together, they painted a picture of officers who had a pattern of aggressive enforcement and a tendency to dismiss challenges to their authority. The data analysis revealed something else too. Other officers in the same precinct showed similar patterns, though not as pronounced. It wasn't just Torres and Bennett. There was something wrong with the culture, the training, or the oversight in that entire district. Dr. Morrison received regular updates on the investigation. She read each report carefully, making notes, asking questions. What struck her most wasn't the malice, it was the lack of awareness. These officers genuinely didn't seem to realize they were treating people differently based on unconscious biases. They thought they were just doing their jobs. 2 weeks after the court incident, Dr. Morrison received a call from the chief of police himself. Chief Anderson was a political appointee, relatively new to the position, and he sounded nervous on the phone. "Dr. Morrison, I wanted to reach out personally to apologize for what happened and to assure you that we're taking this matter very seriously." "I appreciate that, Chief," she replied. "What steps are you taking?" "Officers Torres and Bennett remain on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. We've also initiated a broader review of our traffic enforcement practices across the department." "That's a start," Dr. Morrison said. "But what about training? What about accountability measures? What about community oversight?" There was a pause. "Those are longer-term initiatives that would require budget approval and—" "Chief Anderson," Dr. Morrison interrupted gently but firmly, "I'm not interested in excuses about budgets and timelines. I'm interested in real change, the kind of change that prevents this from happening to someone else." "Of course, Dr. Morrison, what would you suggest?" She had been thinking about this question since the moment she left that courtroom. "I'd suggest a partnership. Homeland Security has extensive training programs on bias recognition, de-escalation, and community relations. We could work with your department to develop a comprehensive retraining program, not as punishment but as professional development." Chief Anderson sounded surprised. "You'd be willing to do that?" "After what happened?" "Chief, I didn't file this complaint to destroy 2 officers' careers or to embarrass your department. I filed it to make things better. If we can turn this into an opportunity for meaningful reform, then something good can come from it." "That's very generous of you." "It's not generous," Dr. Morrison corrected. "It's practical. Punishing 2 officers doesn't fix a systemic problem. Training does. Culture change does. Leadership commitment does." They talked for another 20 minutes, working out the broad strokes of what a partnership might look like. By the end of the call, Dr. Morrison felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, this could turn into something positive. But she also knew that real change was hard. It required sustained effort, genuine commitment, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Not everyone would be on board. There would be resistance, pushback, people who insisted that nothing was really wrong and all this fuss was just political correctness run amok. That evening, as Dr. Morrison sat in her home office reviewing case files, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was spam, but something made her open it. "Dr. Morrison, this is Ramon Torres. I know I probably shouldn't contact you directly, but I needed to say something. You were right about everything. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past 2 weeks, and I'm starting to see things I never saw before. I don't know if I'll still have a job when this is over, but either way, I'm going to be different. Better. Thank you for not just letting it slide. Someone needed to call us out. And I'm glad it was someone who cared enough to try to fix things instead of just burning it all down." Dr. Morrison read the message twice. Then she typed a simple response. "Officer Torres, accountability is the first step. Growth is the second. I hope you get the chance to take both. Good luck." She hit send and set her phone down. Change was coming. whether the department was ready for it or not. And sometimes change started in the most unexpected places, with the most unlikely catalysts. Sometimes it started with a traffic stop that should have been routine, a ticket that should have been paid, and one woman who refused to let injustice slide just because it would have been easier. Sometimes that's all it took. 6 months had passed since that day in court, and the city looked the same on the surface, but underneath things were changing. The investigation into the police department's traffic enforcement practices had uncovered more than anyone expected. It wasn't just about 2 officers making mistakes. It was about patterns that had gone unnoticed for years, about quotas that were never officially acknowledged but everyone knew existed, about entire neighborhoods that felt targeted rather than protected. The data told a story that was hard to ignore. In predominantly minority neighborhoods, traffic stops happened 3 times more frequently than in other areas, even when controlling for traffic volume and violation rates. Officers were more likely to issue citations rather than warnings. Stop times lasted longer. Requests for searches were more common, and when people contested tickets, the dismissal rate suggested that many of those citations shouldn't have been written in the first place. The Department of Justice's report was damning, but also constructive. It didn't just point out problems. It recommended solutions, mandatory bias training, body camera requirements, community oversight boards, regular audits of citation patterns, and perhaps most importantly, a culture shift that emphasized de-escalation and community partnership over enforcement metrics. Chief Anderson, to his credit, didn't fight the recommendations. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall, or maybe he genuinely wanted to do better. Either way, he embraced the reform package and began implementing changes immediately. One of the first calls he made was to Dr. Morrison. "We're ready to move forward with that partnership we discussed," he told her. "If your offer still stands," it did. Within a month, Homeland Security trainers were working with the police department to develop a comprehensive retraining program. It wasn't just a few PowerPoint slides and a check-the-box exercise. It was intensive, challenging, and designed to make officers genuinely examine their own biases and behaviors. Officers Torres and Bennett were among the first to go through the program. The Internal Affairs investigation had concluded that while they had shown poor judgment and exhibited patterns of biased enforcement, there wasn't evidence of intentional discrimination or malicious intent. They were given a choice: complete the retraining program and accept reassignment to community outreach roles, or face termination. They both chose retraining. Ramon sat in the classroom on the first day of the program, feeling a mixture of anxiety and determination. The instructor was a veteran from Homeland Security, a woman who had spent 20 years in federal law enforcement and had seen every kind of situation imaginable. "This training isn't about making you feel guilty," she began. "It's about making you better at your jobs, because here's the truth. Biases make you less effective as officers. They cloud your judgment. They damage community trust. They put you and the people you're supposed to protect at risk." Over the next 4 weeks, Ramon and the other officers went through scenarios, watched videos of their own traffic stops, analyzed their decision-making processes, and confronted uncomfortable truths about themselves. It was harder than Ramon expected. Seeing footage of himself at that traffic stop with Dr. Morrison, watching how his body language changed when she questioned him, hearing the dismissiveness in his own voice, it was like looking at a stranger. "I really thought I was being professional," he said during one session. "I didn't think I was treating her any differently." "That's how unconscious bias works," the instructor explained. "You don't think you're doing it. But look at the video. When she questioned the validity of the stop, your tone changed. Your posture became more defensive. You were less willing to consider that you might have been mistaken. Now ask yourself, would you have reacted the same way if she had been a well-dressed white businessman?" Ramon wanted to say yes, but as he watched the footage again, he wasn't sure anymore. And that uncertainty was uncomfortable but necessary. Kyle struggled even more with the training. He had always prided himself on being fair, on treating everyone the same. Confronting evidence that maybe he hadn't been as fair as he thought shook his confidence. But slowly he started to understand. It wasn't about being a bad person. It was about recognizing that everyone has biases, and the key was being aware of them and actively working to counteract them. The community outreach assignment that followed was eye-opening for both officers. Instead of patrolling in cars, looking for violations, they were walking beats in the neighborhoods where they had written most of their citations. They were attending community meetings, talking to residents, hearing concerns and complaints directly. At one meeting in a neighborhood community center, an elderly woman stood up and addressed Ramon directly. "You gave my grandson a ticket last year," said he ran a red light. He didn't have a dash cam, couldn't prove otherwise, so he paid the fine. Cost him $200 he didn't have. Made him late on his rent. You probably don't even remember it. Ramon didn't remember it. He had written hundreds of tickets. But he could see the impact in this woman's face, hear the frustration in her voice. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. If I was wrong, I'm truly sorry. Sorry doesn't give him his money back," she replied. But then her expression softened slightly. "But I'll tell you what. You being here listening, that's something. It's more than we usually get." Moments like that happened regularly. People had stories, grievances, experiences with police that ranged from mildly annoying to genuinely traumatic. And Ramon and Kyle had to stand there and listen. Not defend, not explain away, just listen and acknowledge and try to do better. It changed them. Slowly but unmistakably, it changed how they saw their jobs and the communities they served. Meanwhile, Dr. Morrison continued her regular work, but she also stayed involved in the reform process. She attended some of the training sessions, not to intimidate but to show support for the officers who were genuinely trying to change. She spoke at community meetings explaining what Homeland Security was doing and why this partnership mattered. At one such meeting, a young man raised his hand. "Dr. Morrison, why do you even care? You fought your ticket, you won, you could have just moved on. Why put in all this effort?" She smiled. "Because it was never just about my ticket. I had resources, video evidence, the knowledge to fight back. Most people don't. If I had just paid the fine or just gotten the officers fired, nothing would have changed. The next person would still get an unfair ticket. The patterns would continue. Real change requires real work." "But you're a federal official," another person said. "You've got important national security stuff to deal with. Why spend time on local police reform?" "Because security isn't just about protecting against external threats," Dr. Morrison explained. "It's about making sure people feel safe in their own communities, protected by their own police, confident that the system treats them fairly. When people don't trust local law enforcement, when they feel targeted rather than protected, that undermines security at every level." The audience nodded, appreciating the honesty and the commitment. 8 months after the courthouse incident, Officer Ramon Torres stood in front of a group of new police recruits at the academy. He had been asked to speak about his experience, to share what he had learned. "It was terrifying and humbling. I thought I was a good cop," he began. "I thought I was fair, professional, doing everything right. And then I wrote a ticket to someone who had video proof that I was wrong. Not just wrong, but completely demonstrably wrong about something I was absolutely certain I had seen clearly." He paused, looking at the young faces in front of him. They were eager, idealistic, ready to make a difference. That moment in court when I realized I had messed up, when I understood that my certainty meant nothing against actual evidence, it broke something in me. But it also rebuilt something better. I learned that confidence without humility is dangerous. I learned that treating people with respect isn't about knowing who they are. It's about recognizing their humanity regardless of who they are. He told them about the retraining, about the community outreach, about the conversations with people he had wronged without even realizing it. "Some of you are thinking this won't happen to you," he continued. "You're thinking you're different, you're better, you won't make those mistakes." I thought the same thing. But here's what I know now. Everyone has biases. Everyone. The question isn't whether you have them. The question is whether you're willing to recognize them and work against them. After his talk, a young recruit approached him. "Officer Torres, do you regret what happened? If you could go back, would you do anything differently?" Ramon thought about it. "I regret writing that ticket when I was wrong. I regret the dismissive attitude. I regret not being better from the start. But do I regret getting called out? Do I regret the consequences? No, because it made me a better officer and hopefully a better person." Kyle had a similar journey, though his path looked different. He ended up specializing in youth outreach, working with teenagers in the same neighborhoods where he used to write tickets. He coached basketball at a community center, mentored kids who were at risk of falling into trouble, and became someone the community actually trusted. "You're that cop who messed up with the Homeland Security lady, right?" one teenager asked him directly one day. Kyle didn't flinch. "Yeah, that was me. And you still got a job?" "Barely," Kyle admitted. "They gave me a second chance, but I had to earn it." "Still earning it every day?" The kid nodded, processing that. "That's kind of cool, actually. That they didn't just fire you. That they tried to fix things instead." "It wasn't about being cool," Kyle said. "It was about doing the right thing. Dr. Morrison could have buried me and my partner. But she cared more about fixing the problem than just punishing people. That's real leadership." A year after the courthouse incident, the police department released its annual report. Traffic citations were down overall, but community satisfaction was up significantly. Complaint rates had dropped. Officer-community relations were improving. The changes weren't perfect and there was still work to do, but the trend lines were all moving in the right direction. Dr. Morrison attended the press conference where the report was released. Chief Anderson specifically acknowledged her role in driving the reforms. "Dr. Morrison could have made this adversarial," he said. "Instead, she made it collaborative. She turned a moment of failure into an opportunity for growth. Our department is better because of her willingness to work with us rather than against us." After the press conference, Dr. Morrison ran into Ramon in the hallway. It was the first time they had seen each other since the retraining program began. "Dr. Morrison," he said, extending his hand, "I wanted to thank you for everything." She shook his hand. "How are you doing, Officer Torres?" "Better," he said honestly. "Different. I actually like my job more now than I did before. I feel like I'm actually helping people instead of just enforcing rules." "That's what good policing should feel like," she replied. "I know this doesn't fix what I did," Ramon continued, "but I want you to know that I think about that day every single day. It reminds me to be better, to question my assumptions, to treat every person with dignity." Dr. Morrison smiled. "That's all any of us can do, Officer Torres. Recognize our mistakes, learn from them, and do better going forward." As she walked away, Ramon felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just for himself, but for the possibility that systems could change, that people could grow, that mistakes could become lessons instead of just endings. The story of Dr. Morrison and the traffic ticket became something of a legend in law enforcement circles. It was taught in academies, discussed in training sessions, used as an example of how accountability and reform could work together, rather than against each other. But for Dr. Morrison, it was never about becoming a symbol or a story. It was simply about refusing to accept injustice, even small injustice, even when it would have been easier to just pay the fine and move on. Because justice isn't just about the big cases and the major issues. Sometimes it's about a traffic ticket, a courtroom confrontation, and the courage to demand better from the systems that are supposed to serve us all. And sometimes that's exactly what changes the world.